Welcome. Thank you guys so much for coming. Margaret, you're too kind. But I can tell you one thing, this is the best editor ever to work for, ever, ever, ever. I tell my students all the time, if you can be half as lucky as I am to work for someone as great as her, then, you know, what is the saying, if you're happy and you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And I really feel that way about what I do with my students. Thank you, Karen, for coming. And as a mother, thank you, Donna, for coming. Yeah. I love what I do, and hopefully my passion will come forth in my talk tonight and what I have to share with you tonight. So welcome to this wonderful evening. Again, thank you for coming. I would first like to thank everyone and thank ECU. I'd like to thank the School of Art and Design for allowing us to have this talk here, and to the Harriot College of Arts and Sciences and its distinguished professor, Margaret Bauer. It's a privilege and an honor to be here. I spent many a day and night in this art building, very building, for 5 years of an undergraduate degree in the 90s. Oh, what an instrumental time that was. As an art student, I developed a love of many things. Wood, I loved wood, metals, photography. In fact, I had professors trying to pull me over to different fields. John Satterfield wanted me to switch over to metals. So kind of going back and forth between different fields, and I loved everything that I did. I also loved African art and, of course, graphic design. I mean, the first photography class that I took, and I saw that image appear, first graphic design class I took and had to build an advertisement and learn what a headline is and how to work with logos and put an image in place. I just knew that graphic design was what I was going to do, and from that moment on, I've been a designer, and I feel very fortunate about that. Although I was engaged very much at that time, a little bit of what I have here, I just wanted to share with you. These actually are this is a Frank Gehry poster I did in one of Eva Roberts' classes, and believe it or not, I still have my portfolio of undergraduate work, 18 by 24 boards. Of all the work I did in Joan Mansfield's classes for illustration. Yes, Joan. I should have brought that to bring back memories. I have all of that work because I knew one day I was going to be an educator. I knew that was my passion and my calling, and that's what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be. And both of my parents were secondary education teachers. I knew I didn't want to teach in high school, but I knew I wanted to teach at some point in time. So I kept these projects, and I bring them out in class often, and I will share the fact, it might be a little difficult to see, but this is cut paper. This right here is a cut paper poster. I try to tell my students all the time that they can get on the computer and make a change and alter things, and Mary's smiling because she was also here during a time of doing everything by hand. I try to tell my students how lucky they have it to be on the computer, and they can make a change and make a variation just like that in the blink of an eye. I mean, these took days and days to do, and the drawings that had to come in place before that. So I just wanted to share a little bit of my kind of reminiscing about my time back in the 90s. This is one of the first projects that I did in Eva's classes, and this is actually cut film. So done by hand. And of course, we can probably all recognize the one on the bottom right. I did not fall asleep in class, I can promise you that. I was very engaged, but I will say the life of an art student is very tiring and can wear you out, and it definitely kept me busy. And then I want to include this image. This is not of the building, but I always like to reminisce about the fact that when I was here, we slept in the building up and down the ramps to register for classes, and all the many hours and nights that we stayed in this building. So I come from ECU, this was my home, this is where I had my beginnings, and just wanted to share a little bit about that with you. So aside from my role in being wrapped up in graphic design, I also had a deep interest in writing and making meaning out of the world around me. To me, I also make meaning out of the words around me. I've always been fascinated with words and typography. It's a huge love of mine. From my perspective, I believe writers and designers have a similar love, a love of words. On one hand, a writer crafts a verbal message, and on another, while the designer takes that message and creates a powerful visual story. My love for words extends itself into the visual realm in probably a more complex way than most might imagine. I consider myself a designer first and foremost, but found my love for all things written while here at ECU. As an art student, the homework in my studio classes involved hours and hours of working on cutting posters, papers, and doing ink projects. But also, it was a very heavy workload. I can recall rescheduling classes that my peers didn't even think of. I took all kinds of classes. I wanted to be engaged through history, literature, and the word. I took courses in children's literature, African art, African American literature, among others. Courses that were not required, especially for an art student. But for me, they allowed me to be an engaged thinker, and it's something that I really like to bring back to the classroom and to my own students. These courses allowed me to expose others, they exposed me to others' thoughts, influences, and choices. These choices allowed me to use my mind in different ways and ultimately taught me a love of reading and writing. And I believe that this engagement had a huge impact on my passion for all things typographic. And it is this love of words that gives me the energy that I need to balance out my responsibilities as a designer and educator. Speaking of energy, where does this come from? I don't know, maybe I should ask my students and my fellow colleagues, how do we keep the energy that we have to keep going on a daily basis? And I ask myself that daily. For me, I think it's that inner desire to make things better, to design better, and to make a difference. I guess it's that little bit of magic deep inside that Margaret talks about. And coincidentally, Margaret, she's obviously a longtime friend and colleague, once mentioned to me that she always looks forward to me working that magic. I do enjoy this metaphor. I think it's kind of, I'm running with it, Margaret. I think it's pretty cool. This idea of wielder of the magic wand, I never thought about that. I like that kind of metaphor. It takes me back. This isn't me, but it kind of looks like me. Dad, don't you think? It could be me, yeah? So it takes me back to what I might have looked like, holding that magic wand, practicing, and as a young tot on how I was going to control the world around me. Because, our special powers for all of us, they start when we're young. We all think we have the power to change the world and to make things different. But then I imagine myself as I grow up and I become master of the world. I am master of the world, controller of light, and queen of the computer lab. But maybe I'm just kidding myself. I'm really just a good witch. I bestow gifts on others, kind words and moments of happiness to my colleagues and my students. But really, I prefer to envision myself as a mighty wizard with the power to control words and images, to arouse laughs and smiles, and to entangle my audience in the beauty of typographic form and structure. Okay, but enough dreaming. Okay, really, it's just me. No special powers. I consider myself a traveler, a costume wearer, a writer, a designer, a design professor, and a mother. And for me, this is just me and my revelations about design. And I know everyone has their own approach to design and what design means to them. So I just want to share a little bit about what the NCLR and design means to me. So aside from the magic, let's talk a little bit about where my beginnings, how they brought me here. I believe the true magic that I enjoy wielding is the North Carolina Literary Review. It's I give my heart and soul to it. It's something that I've done for a really long time. I'll talk a little bit about that time in just a few minutes, and Margaret hinted at that, how long I've been with NCLR. And it's hard to believe. I was asking my dad, I said, Dad, can you believe, I'm this old, or I'm this many, does that mean you're getting older, or am I getting older? I'm not really sure, but reflecting back and realizing I've been working on this journal for about 20 years is pretty amazing, and it's great. I've really enjoyed every minute of it. So for two primary reasons that I wanted to talk about the power of effective design in the literary landscape, is that when first thinking about what to best talk about, I think this magic really involves just revealing my secrets and what I do to approach design for the NCLR. And thinking about the design decisions that shape the look of this book and what we bring to this journal. And second, I want to spread the word that this is really a best kept secret. I mean, if you're in this area and around Greenville and you're knowledgeable with the NC Writers Conference and other writing venues, you may be familiar with the NCLR, but it's really a beautiful journal and a beautiful writing, beautiful art, all of those things that come together. And Margaret, I agree wholeheartedly that it's a collaborative effort, and it takes many people to allow this book to shine as beautiful as it does. And creating this journal offers many challenges, but primarily it's involved with bringing the text to life and creating visual relationship between the text and image in the book. If you're not familiar with the North Carolina Literary Review, how many of you guys how many of you guys subscribe?
Yeah, good.
A few? Oh, good. I see. That's awesome. Okay. I'm taking names. And, If you're not familiar with it, it's a large comprehensive body of work that focuses on creative fiction, poetry, fiction, drama, to interviews and articles, literary criticism. And then the design focuses intently on creating an engaging communication between the reader and the writer. The vibrant and organic features of the magazine is what allows its effective design has allowed it to become such a great literary gem for North Carolina. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of the journal, a little bit of overview from Margaret. The words and letters and writings of the NCLR have been a part of my vocabulary since the very beginning. I'm fortunate to have had the opportunity to work on the NCLR since 1996, when I began as a student and assistant art director supporting Ezzell Roberts and Stanton Blakesley with design. At this time, I was a senior graphic design student and the world of journal design was new to me. I reveled in the thought of being able to use the NCLR as a canvas where I could explore ideas and nuances about typography that are not usually investigated in a literary journal. Each issue was handcrafted by writers, designers, artists, and photographers, a weaving of word, story, and meaning, the exact elements that I found passion in exploring as a student. And I really found that this was a venue that I was able to explore some of those things. And very thankful to Ezzell Roberts for allowing me to participate, and to Alex Albright for allowing me to participate as well as a student. This is one of the first stories that I did as a student designer. I think the journal has beautiful simplicity, a very strong use of the grid. And interestingly, I look back at a lot of the work that I've created 20 years ago, 19 years ago, 15 years ago, and I still love the pieces. And I say that because it can be very common for a designer to look back at something they've created and say, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? That, I don't know what I was thinking about the typeface that I chose, or what I was thinking at that particular moment. But the great thing about the NCLR is that it's timeless. And from day one and very first issue on, all of the designers have done an excellent job with this journal. Another spread showing a beautiful display of type and image moving across the page, balancing out within that space. I also see a texture of type, a flow of space. Again, another story I did as a student. What I think is really wonderful about the NCLR is it became a venue for designers to experiment a little bit. I don't know if some of you may or may not remember some of Stanton Blakesley's work with the NCLR way back in the day in the beginning. Some of it was a little bit controversial in terms of its readability, and I think he really pushed kind of the limits of what you could do with typography in the journal. But I think it really paved the way for allowing a little bit of more flexibility with what decisions could be made from the design perspective. And so my perspective in terms of laying things out is wanting to create a mood and a flow and a feeling for what was happening on the page, and to engage that viewer into not only the written story and the verbal side of what they were reading, but bring them into a visual sensation of what they were experiencing in the story. The pages are designed in a way that brings the viewer's eyes through the story, through the different information, the photography, and the images. And these layouts, again, are from one of the early, I think, 96. So then, I've had, the work for my NCLR has been continuous since 1996, except for, as Margaret mentioned, I didn't know you were going to mention that, the year my daughter was born. And believe you me, I was thinking about ways I could do it. I wanted to work, but having a newborn was a lot of work, so I said, okay, I'll just take this year off. Throughout this time, I had often thought about ways that I might be able to contribute to the NCLR in a new way. And then in 2008, after spending many years working as a designer and contributing, I had that aha moment when I realized that I was truly ready to take on a lot of hard but very rewarding work. I distinctly remember when I first realized my desire to redesign the NCLR. Okay, I'm not at all saying that the NCLR was bad. It was not, and it never has been. But I'm a very particular designer. Margaret can probably attest to that, and so can Miss Karen. For me, I would begin looking at just some of the elements that were laid out in the journal, and I started noticing different typefaces where an advertisement might be placed against the front entry of another title page for another story, and they just bothered me a little bit. I thought, I want to do something about this. I don't know if Margaret will let me, but I'm I'm gonna try. I'm gonna see what she'll allow me to do in terms of. I just felt uncomfortable about that juxtaposition. And obviously, the NCLR has never looked like this. But just to make my point, there are times when you can choose different scripts, typefaces, serif, sans serif, and they just don't work well together. They mismatch, and you lose the impact of reading one particular story over another. So this is kind of that moment when things kind of spoke to me. And I wanted to do something about it. And I looked at design as a challenge where everything is a problem to solve. And my goal is to give good design to the world and give back. I wanted to design with more intent, and I was on a mission to share my vision with others. And these are just a few examples of some of the stories I've done over the years. And thinking about the one on the right-hand side, and this one on the right-hand side, really thinking about having the typography interact with the imagery, having typography rotated, and thinking about bringing a power and a movement to the text. I felt, and I still feel, that design is a living, breathing process, a process that needs refining and explaining, that needs direction and form, structure and flow. All of these things that I can find in the NCLR, I think, represent that idea of good design. This is another story. It was a very simple story. The title of the story was Explosions, and I really wanted to play with the simplicity of type. And as you'll see in some of the future examples I share, I really like to push and be on that kind of edge of what I like to term as experimental typography, but yet the fact that it has to function within a specific environment, and you have to be aware of your audience and who's reading it, and that it has to be functional. And I love the input, as I'm looking at Diane, from Diane and Margaret over the years, sending something back to me saying, I don't think I can really read that. And good input, because we often as designers might come into something and think it looks great. So I don't get that too often, but I love it when she'll come back and say, that's maybe a little confusing. I'm like, no, you're right, I didn't think about that. So I appreciate y'all's feedback over the years. So, as Margaret already mentioned, little did I know when I started working on the NCLR that I would still be immersed in this world of literary wonder 19 years later. It's been a wonderful journey, and even more so since my role as art director began in 2008. Wow, that's been 7 years. Wow, time has really gone by. That's when I approached Margaret with the idea of changing the design of the journal. I saw this as an exciting professional opportunity and a chance to change my role within the journal and to continue as its fourth art director. Although I had this grand idea in my mind, Margaret's first response was hesitancy, and yes, a general feeling of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I agreed with her. I agreed it was not broke. I was not saying that it was broke, but that I just had a vision, and I wanted to share the power of my ideas with Margaret. And I specifically remember having a meeting at her house with Lorraine and Diane and Liza and me. I might be missing someone. Joan, and sharing my ideas about the journal and about creating some of what we're getting ready to take a look at in terms of how the power of my ideas might work. So the redesign of the journal began with sketching and thinking about the identity of the journal, knowing that I did not want to break solely from its tradition and the readership that the journal has garnered, and wanting to make sure that it still communicated what it needed to its existing audience while considering how we might engage a new audience as well. I began thinking about this and wanted to consider the NCLR identity. And so something that I worked on a lot. Here on the left, you can see the original identity created by Eva Roberts. And on the right, just a few of my sketches thinking about what a visual system might become for the journal and how it could expand both on the web, in printed material, and as a masthead for the journal. A few more pages of sketching. I always have these grand ideas about creating books and having the edge of the book actually have the acronym for the book fold, so that when you flip the edges of the pages and they come and fall together, that the name would be on there. So I had all these ideas, some things I haven't actually discussed with Margaret about. So you're hearing this for the first time. But just various ideas I had about what this book could be, how far could it change, what could it become, other sketches. A lot of what I'm going to show you tonight is more digital, but as part of my process, I do a lot of sketching. I do a lot of looking in terms of research, and then sketching out ideas and thinking about what might happen with the acronym for the NCLR and how that might be visualized, and looking at lots of different ways to create that composition and that structure. Sketching allowed me to find those configurations, and I knew that the identity needed to be clear and have a strong visual presence, needed to be readable. And the spine of the book was important to me, was very important to me. And one of the first things you see on the bookshelf is the spine and the recognition of a book. And here you can see where I was thinking about the front masthead and then what might happen with the spine. And that's something that I struggle with when I look on my bookshelves and I can't tell how to grab a book and what's what. And I wanted to make sure that you could see the NCLR on the shelf and that you would know immediately where that book was and how to find it. So a little quiz time. Can you find the original NCLR and the new design of the NCLR? So this is one. I just hid them on there. They don't. Yes. I don't have them separated from all my other ones, but I just did a hide test for you guys. So the fifth book from the right is the current design with the spine design, and then the fifth book from the left. Can I count? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5. Fifth book from the left, and I guess. Yeah, fifth book from the right is the original version. And so something for me, really wanting that to stand off amidst all that we all have tons of books on our bookshelves, and wanting that book to be recognizable in a quick and easy manner. And then I have 2 of these wonderful bookshelves, one in my office at home and one in my office at work, where I keep my NCLRs. And as you can see, this is the very first one on the left and the very last one on the right. They're beautiful, and I'm not just saying that because I designed it. It's a beautiful book. It's a really beautiful book, and the writing is just outstanding. I recommend that you get it if you don't have it. And then I just wanted to share an image of this was the first masthead that was created that kept kind of the stacking of the NCLR on the cover. And I ended up removing this particular stacking from the cover and just leaving that acronym on the spine. And part of the reason why I chose to do that was to allow a little bit more space on the cover for the image so that masthead wasn't covering the image as much as what it had done previously. And then on the back of the NCLR, I also found it very important to make sure that the identity of the journal was still recognizable. So if you take that book and you set it down in your office, whether it's facing the top way, you immediately see in North Carolina Literary Review, you can read it from the spine, or if you flip it on the back, you immediately know what the book is and what the journal is. So all of those parts were very important for me to bring to the journal as a new design element. So for me, the magic involved in this also involves focusing on why design really matters. Why does design really matter? And I think it is very important to consider for literary journals. I've picked up many, and they're pretty straightforward, and that's okay. But I think that's the secret of the NCLR, is that you don't find another literary journal out there like the NCLR. So why does design matter? Why is it important to consider? Especially for a literary journal. Why is that important? Because it's very important, and I'm a strong believer that everything should have what I like to call a visual voice. What does that really mean? For me, it can mean lots of things, but I kind of have a basic definition of what I think visual voice is. And in a nutshell, it is that visual presence that you create that promotes, educates, entertains, inspires, informs, all of those things through the use of consistent design elements. And those design elements primarily are pretty much for everything that you view, whether it's a poster, a website, printed material, a book, is typography, color, the message, and the image that's there. And making sure that how those things come together and the stylistic way in which they come together is what creates that visual voice. So we all know that people make assumptions based on the visual appearance of things. We live, eat, and breathe design through the visual voices of the many established brands that we encounter on a daily basis, through the products we use, the food we eat, the restaurants we frequent, the clothes we wear, the household items we use, the cars we drive, to the coffee we drink. Design matters because we cannot not be affected by it. No matter if you've never even thought about that, pick up your newspaper. Is it readable? Is it legible to you? Do you squint your eyes? Do you need your glasses? Is the type big enough? Everything that we view and everything that we look at, design matters. And I believe that we respond to those elements of design either positively or negatively. And for me, to create the visual voice for the NCLR involved focusing on establishing that strong presence through type, image, and consistent look and feel. There was already a set type system created for the journal initially, and that was modified in terms of the type style, the typefaces used for the journal, and the choices of imagery continue to be well chosen by Diane, so which is a great asset to this journal. The work is just gorgeous in the journal, both the artwork and the photography that comes into the book. For the NCLR, I feel that it's important to understand that typography is crucial, and it's crucial to understand that it has an effect on how you are perceived. The type of typography you use creates perception in the eyes of the viewer. So they will either perceive you as being sophisticated or not sophisticated based on the kind of type. These are just a few examples I just wanted to share with you. Nothing fancy about these particular examples. One is for a carnival fun fair for the Meredith Autism Program, and you can see the kind of carnival nature of the type, the stylistic all-cap typography used here in this design. And then this is a poster design, or actually it's a tabletop design sitting that can be found around UNC Charlotte, or at one time could be found. So I think about like the message and what kind of typography is used to speak to you, and how you want others to react to that. And I think that for me, the typography was a very important component for the NCLR in terms of how the NCLR has evolved. So as a general rule of thumb, I was very intentional about selecting a typeface that gave a lot of options or ranges. And I'm certainly, this is not a class teaching lesson, I understand, but I thought it would be helpful to understand a little bit about when you hear someone talk about a typeface or a family of type, what we use now for the journal is Franklin Gothic. And the great thing about choosing a typeface family that has a broad range of styles is that gives you the ability to be very consistent in your design, but have movement and create visual depth on the page with your stylistic choices that you make with typography. And so choosing a typeface like Franklin Gothic allows for a typeface to be very thin and light, or be very bold and heavy on the page. And you can allow those different styles to come together to create a marriage and union on the page as well. Just some examples when, again, thinking about typefaces. In past issues of NCLR and just other magazines in general, you will see all different ranges of typefaces. Here you can see a list of sans serif typefaces that are pretty tried and true, that have withstood the test of time, and are very usable and functional in a lot of different arenas. Same thing with the serif typefaces in the center. And then on the right-hand typeface, the display list. This is where, for me, it gets a little trickier, because you have a lot of different stylistic choices in display type, where the nature of the shape and the nature of the form can be difficult to read. And for me, I wanted to make sure that that I did not want to do this in the NCLR. I wanted to move away from having, even if a particular display typeface might function well for the kind of story that was being told, or it felt right with that particular story. For me, the balance in the journal, moving from page to page and spread to spread, was very important to have that balance of look and not come upon something like Bauhaus in one place and Storybook in another, or have those juxtaposed next to each other and they look awkward or not feel right together. So, I tell my students, I'll hang up on the wall and say, you are not allowed, there are typefaces you're not allowed to use. These are 4 of them: Curls, Comic Sans, Papyrus, and Bradley Hand. Last year, I started a Design Matters series at Meredith, and I periodically talk about the basics of design with campus, with my staff and faculty across campus. And it's been really enlightening and really wonderful to do that, because a lot of people really don't know about the basics of design. And I'll say, I don't have anything against Comic Sans. It's not personal. It's not personal at all. It's not personal against Papyrus. What it is that they don't function. They don't function well in the environments that they're in. Having curls as all caps, the balance of space. Okay, so we have curls here and we have curls here. Obviously, this makes it even harder to read when they're all different colors. The idea that for whatever reason, Fortune 500 companies think that Comic Sans is the typeface you need to use for like memos. It's not. So there are different typefaces that the way they communicate is unsophisticated. And it's not the way you want to represent what you're doing. So for me, I don't know that we ever used any of these in the NCLR, but just to talk to you a little bit about the importance of choosing a sophisticated typography and why that's important for the NCLR. So the magic, revealing my secrets, also involves sharing my personal creative process. And for a journal of this magnitude, it can be, it involves quite a bit. And for me and the designers that work on this journal, it involves reading the content. So this is what the designers receive from Margaret. We receive the text, straightforward, unstylized. Okay, when I say unstylized, it is styled in terms of the style sheets created for specific body text within the book. But when it comes to us, there's no title design, there's no movement or design or feeling for the stories that come to the designers. So I like to think, okay, I'm going to wave my magic wand a little bit, and I start my process. So the first thing I do is read the stories. I read every story that comes to me before I ever do any design. I need to know what the stories say. If not, then I don't have a feeling for the type of personality, the communication, the feeling that the reader intends the viewer to have for the story. So this is an example of some of the research that I do after I read the story, and I have in my mind the kind of feeling that it gives me. Is it funny? Is it humorous? Is it serious? All of those kinds of different things. And I look and document. I don't even know how many process books that I have of all this type of research that I get inspired by, to see how type is stacked, to look at color relationships, and then I'll look at some of the examples and I might say, oh, I like that, that's really cool, but that would not work for the NCLR. It is not readable. It will not function. And I'll look at some of it and I'll say, that's beautiful. That is a gorgeous display of space, movement of typography, use of color. Although we use color in the online issues, not in print. But it really allows me to see how to use space. And I get very inspired by that. Just a few more examples of some layouts, thinking about movement. Think about it. If you've been working on the same journal design for 20 years, and I don't even know how many stories I do a year. I know I did the 2009 issue all pretty much by myself, because I told her I wanted to do it. I was like, I want to do it. I want to set the standard for this. Imagine doing the stories over and over again. You have to be inspired to think in a different way about what it is you're going to design, and you need to bring something new to the table and think about how am I going to read. How is this not going to be the same thing the reader saw a year ago, 2 years ago? So this gets my juices flowing and allows me to really think and get ideas about what I want to do. And then this is a specific example I want to share with you. This is some different layouts. There was an article, or excuse me, a story called Weeds. And the particular story, just the nature of the title itself, with the idea of growth and movement and the verticality of thinking about weeds growing and the movement upward of things. This gave me inspiration. I have sketches that I did after this process, but I'm in the process of moving and some of my books are packed and I couldn't get to them. So I moved from this point and created sketches with the typography and the story that I created. And this is the final solution that happened for the story, just to give you a little bit of an idea about how thinking about, I'm going to go back for just a second, thinking about the verticality of form and how to play with columns of typography and movement, and then applying that kind of idea within the context of the journal. So for me, it's very much about finding a visual inspiration and seeing where that can take me. And I encourage I bring this to the classroom. That's what I love about the NCLR. I don't even know if Margaret knows this, but this is a big teaching tool for me. I'll talk quite a bit about the processes involved and share that with my students so that they understand I'm not asking them to sketch just for the sake of sketching. It's a mental process that you have to go through to get to solid solutions. And sketching is crucial. I don't allow them just to do research. They do research, but they must do sketches. And I do the same thing. Just a lot of my books were hidden or packed up. Another example I wanted to show you down here in the bottom right. These are some, actually all across the bottom. These are all influential images for me. in thinking about when we had our film issue, North Carolina Literature into Film, in 2012, wanting to play with how to create a cover and a back cover. Was this our first online?
Yes.
Okay, I thought it was. This was our first online issue, and so I was playing with the idea of creating the masthead as more of a square form, and then thinking about this, and actually Margaret's not seen this, one of the designs I was considering was how to work with the cover as a kind of a patchwork of space. And this shows you one of my sketches for that, thinking about how to create a breakdown so that each kind of area within that cover might represent, fiction, interviews, etc. within the journal. And then thinking about what would happen with the background, or excuse me, the back of the journal here. And then this is the final for the journal. And what, again, on the top right, some sketching for thinking about one of my colleagues, Shannon Johnstone, was one of the photographers for this cover, and working together with her to think about creating this image and creating that color palette, but then the original vision that I had about really mimicking that idea of that movement of film and bringing that to the visual side of the journal. I love doing the covers, they're a lot of fun, and so sometimes we'll start on the covers earlier in the process, at the very beginning. Diane picks great art, and she'll give me a range of things to choose from, and what's your vision, what do you see, and it's great when we're on the same, I'll bring something back, and she'll, oh, I love it, that's great, and so it's this great play between allowing this cover of this journal to really breathe the life of what happens inside, I think. So just a reminder, this is what it looks like when you start, and I work, I do my research, I do my sketching, I have my ideas, and then that turns into that. Not overnight. It is not a one-step process. I believe this is the final version of this, but it's pretty amazing if you think about, we start with nothing. We started with a very clean slate. And it can be challenging, right, Ms. Karen? It can be very challenging. I mean, oftentimes I'll have students and or other people look at it and be, oh, yeah, that was easy. I'm like, yeah, I spent days. I'll work on it and then I'll come back. And I think that's part of my own approach to design and wanting to bring maybe a little bit of my own perfectionism to that. But I have a lot of fun with it, and I take pride in what I do, and I want to make sure that others enjoy that and see the time that's built behind that. So another kind of example of, just to give you, these are some ranges of designs that I started with. So when I started working, I immediately moved to, say, making the type stack in all caps and seeing how that would work and what does that mean and what does that communicate. On the bottom, some more inspiration for me. Probably one of my favorite things is stacked beauty of typography and just the flow of that as a form, which is why I focus quite a bit on that in my title designs and what I create for the journal. So these were very inspirational for me, different examples that I found, and then thinking about how that might be effective as a technique in one of the designs that I create. So this shows you kind of a range of what I was working with. The one in the middle, this is, I think, the original one that I sent, and I remember we were almost going to press, and one of the last proofs that we looked at this, Margaret mentioned, can we take a look at that title one more time? And I can't remember which of the grad students was reading it, but there was commentary about a little bit of confusion about the readability of William Wordsworth, that it kind of read as William and Wordsworth the, even though the typographic style differentiates that. So I played with that, and I think the actual flow and readability is stronger in the final solution. Another kind of just breakdown of process for me. This was actually a very simple story, but one of my favorites. I love the dramatic quality of using black and white and using a lot of dark backgrounds, and oftentimes I remember when I used to do a lot of that, and Margaret would ask me, say something about it being really heavy or being dark, and I'm like, oh, but it's so nice. It's so dramatic, and I would talk about, for me, the power and what it did on the page. But I've learned to kind of balance that out because the reader.
Now you get one
right,
per issue.
One per issue. She might want to be working with some dark background. Because I do understand it's more difficult on the eyes to read small white type on a black background. But this is a really fun story for me. This just I did a screen grab of the space that I work in. So again, the type comes to me, it's just straightforward on a white sheet of paper. I do my research and my looking and my sketching, and then start to bring a life to the typography and create typographic systems, create visual hierarchy with the type, and work with the imagery that's been assigned with each story, and think about how that imagery can take place. And I get great direction as well from Diane and Margaret about where images should flow through the book. And oftentimes I have the freedom of, it doesn't matter, but one, you need to start at the beginning and disperse them out across spreads, or she'll be, might be very specific that the title page must have this image, this page must have this image, etc. And obviously the images relate more often than not to what the text says, so the images have to be placed in a particular place. But this was a lot of fun for me. I really love doing this design. And then this is the movement is started here, moving to the right, then moving down, moving across, and then moving here. And I actually don't think this was the final one. The next page is the final one. So this is the final design. And again, this one image was my inspiration for creating this design. That's something that I talk a lot about with my students. They have a lot of difficulty wondering, how do you be inspired but not steal what someone else has done? And I think it's important to talk about that I see the type of design that I do. When I look at visual examples that inspire me, I look at the breakdown of space, how they use typography, how they place captions, different stylistic techniques that they use, and I think about how I can bring them into the NCLR to create something new for the viewer to see. If every issue of the NCLR had the same look for every single story, for every issue, it wouldn't have that dynamic quality that it has to kind of pull you into the stories and what you see. So oftentimes I can see one thing, and it starts me, and that gets me going for what I can create and what I want to do. Another example on the left of the plain text, and on the right what I did with that as a spread. So just a few examples here. Ron Rash's Serena and the Blank and Pitiless Gaze of Exploitation in Appalachia by Joyce Brown, again across the top. So a lot of time goes into kind of breaking this down and working with how to juxtapose various images. Does an image go all the way across a spread? Does it start as a spread? Does it start as a right-hand page? And thinking about how the flow is going to be created throughout the journal. A lot of time is spent by Margaret thinking about how it's all going to flow together. How when something needs to start as a spread and end as a right-hand page or a left-hand page. So a lot of that is a part of this play. And here you can see my first variations. I started with the title and the textual composition starting on the right-hand page. And actually the way it ended was having the title kind of set on the left-hand page by itself, and then having the entry text in relationship to an image of Ron Rash, which I think really captured him because it was about him. So a lot of thought goes into what happens with these layouts. Another fun layout I really enjoyed, again on the left, two of my initial versions. Maybe that's not the best subject matter. No, this is a really fun play. So you need to go back and get every issue of the NCLR and read. No, really, you do need to. So we've got different versions of thinking about how to stack that type. For me, this bottom one, the header got hidden. It didn't have the visual emphasis that it needed. Didn't have the balance that it needed. This probably has the most readable in the very first version that I did. But what I also do when I design is I think about what I create on the title page and how that moves forward through an entire story. So it's not just about what happens right here, but it's about all of these elements and how I pull those elements throughout an entire story. So the one on the right was the final, and I don't have the other spreads for that, sorry. Gotta get the book.
It's out there.
Yeah, what issue is that? That's number 18. Number 18, yes. Okay, so again, some more of my visual inspiration you can see from one of my process books and sketchbooks. And I'll make notes about this to me feels right, that it would work for something particular. So this is not the same by any means, but I love this simple typographic system and the way the drop caps hung down for the titles. And the use of the simple line is a very simple element, and I thought this was a really beautiful, has a beautiful feeling to it, and it worked out really well that we did a series of 3 plays. And this photography here is by Shannon Johnstone, but 3 of Sam Post's plays, and I thought using that kind of clean, very simple system was a great way to tie that series of plays together. A few more, again, a layout for peripheral vision, and on the right-hand side, just some inspirational images for me. You know, when I'm looking at the inspirational images, I think about readability. I knew that this would not work in the NCLR, having type run off the edges of shapes where it's not readable, having some things really where you can't make out the word, but thinking about the technique and the movement and how that could be brought into the NCLR as creating something that has a movement. And also went really well with the type of story and what the story said and what the story was about. The inspirational image on the left and how it inspired, that was an inspiration for me to create this interview with Betty Adcock. Another series that by John L. that I've actually brought across several issues of the book because either stories may have been related, or they may have been the same writers from one journal to another. And so there have been some cases where I've worked on title designs and stacking, and then brought that into another issue because it flowed from one to another really well. But this was a particularly fun set of spreads for me. And some of my latest work, with this year's last online issue, I teach lots of different typography classes, and in my upper level type classes, I talk a lot about experimental typography and what does that mean. And you will see in a lot of art programs or design programs this notion of experimenting with type, but it never is taken to a point where that typography can be used. Can it be applicable in a serious space to function? Is the poster readable? Does it make sense to me? So what I wanted to do is play with the idea that I love the way these images, the letter forms kind of stacked and broke apart. And I wanted to see if Margaret would let me get away with doing it for the NCLR. And I wanted to play with the readability of that. And I did it, and that works. It's readable. You can understand it. The letters connect. And so for me, it was a way to bring some movement and a feeling that matched the artwork. There was a great sense of movement and simplicity, the way, for me, the art kind of had this falling down motion and the idea of the text falling down, and then having broken apart text that came with the call-outs throughout the story. This is one of the stories I really enjoyed doing as of late to get to experiment. And then just another example of, these are two different versions I started. And so this is one that really went through a lot of change. Sometimes I'll work on a story design and I'll be inspired by something and I'll lay that out, like this example here, and I just wasn't cutting it. I mean, it's very simple and it's easy to read and it's there, but for me, it didn't fit with what I read. What I was reading and the feeling of the typography and the flow did not work. So I loved the stacking of type in this example, and I loved the idea of kind of highlighting type and reading. So I started kind of playing with that work in different places, and then the right-hand version is the final. And I really think that's a very sophisticated stacking and display of type that really mimics the writing, and I hope that the authors are pleased with the pieces when they get them. I hope that they bring a life to the work that makes them happy and makes them proud of their work. A few more pieces from this past year. They all kind of run together. I do some media, I'm trying to make it separate all the years from one another. So a few more pieces. And then here you can see here's the second spread for that stacking that I shared earlier, showing how those call-out boxes can interact with the page, but the use of the grid is very simple and clean. So to kind of wrap up, just a little bit about kind of not only the journal, but really also in creating this new design for the NCLR, wanting to create a consistent and cohesive system that could be used by Margaret in marketing collateral, letterhead design, etc. And giving her a branding system, if you will, that she could use in multiple contexts. So I created a style guide in 2010, which was also a pretty big undertaking to highlight all the different aspects of the NCLR, and I won't bore you with all the details of that, but I'll just give you an example of, this is a style sheet page that just shows the style sheet for particular text and how it should be set in the journal. So this is created for the benefit of graduate students, editors, graphic designers. Everyone gets a copy of the style guide, and it keeps everyone on the same page with understanding how to create consistency and keep consistency in the journal. And then I wanted to just share this with you. I also added in the last year in the style guide, these are several different examples of different title designs I've done over the years. And I wanted to be able to bring some examples to our other designers in understanding how when I kind of limited the scope of typefaces that we use in the journal, you can still have good variety. I could take anything and give me one sans serif and one serif, or give me one typeface family, and I can create variation with just that one limitation. And I wanted to say there are a few different changes here, but the consistency and the balance of how these work together, I think, flow very well for the journal. And then just a few notes about just some of the changes in the journal. In the older design here at the bottom, you'll see there's a header at the top of the page and a footer at the bottom. In the new design, the footer went away, and the top part of the page is the only place that we have the folio or page number information in the journal. The reason why that was done was for a few different reasons. One, it was to allow us to have this space at the bottom of the page where we could put footnotes and captions and have them in a consistent place. Because previously, and it wasn't bad, I just felt like it limited the range of what I could do on the page. Previously, they were on the right-hand side right here. Previously, in the older design, you can see the footer at the bottom of the page. The caption information and things were very limited to being held in the sidebars. And if you really think about it, that's very limiting. It only gives you this amount of space to work with on the page. It became limiting in terms of doing a layout design. Another thing that was added in the new design were table of contents at the front of the book and intermittently between the different separations in the book for the flashback section, so that the primary feature section, flashbacks, and NC miscellany, creating different breakups where you could come in, and then at the bottom, always telling you how you could jump to the next section to maneuver easily between content in the book. Just another example, this is the NC miscellany spread. And then, and what was also great about this is it gave Margaret a place to bring more commentary and discussion about what was going to happen in that section of the book, where previously she had very limited amount of space where she could discuss important things she wanted to be able to tell the audience. So that also gave her the arena to be able to give more information to the reader. Again, this is the main table of contents, and then at the bottom it also always tells you where you can jump to get to the flashbacks and the North Carolina miscellany. So this brings me to kind of where we've moved and where we're at now. Is this upcoming 25th anniversary of the NCLR, 25 wonderful years of beautiful writing and art and design, and wanting to create kind of a new advertising or marketing for the journal this year. And so coming up with kind of this title that it's actually a quote that Catherine Strickland-Beyer stated in Our State magazine, and I read it and I said, oh, that's it. That is it. It's this notion that the NCLR is a well-kept secret, but we don't want it to be so well-kept. We want to get it out there. We want people to know about the NCLR and what it has to offer readers, writers, anyone that enjoys literature and art and design. So this is an example of some letterhead, the recent call for submission forms. All of these can be found online at NCLR's website. And the website is
NCLR.
Yeah, right there. I knew it was big. I knew it was big on something. NCLR.ECU.edu. You can get information about submissions. This is our new subscription card. Subscribe today. You can find out about paying for a 2-year subscription or a 1-year subscription. And again, here's the website. The website changes with every issue in terms of the image here and the background image changes to relate to what the current issue is that is out at that particular time. A lot of information on the website. You can pretty much find anything you need in terms of getting in contact about NCLR. And then just a few of the covers that I've worked on since 2009. You can see them dated. The top cover was our first redesign issue. Here you can see how the masthead has that vertical stacking of the acronym on both of these versions, and then in just a few more versions you'll see that that comes away from the journal. Our wonderful Joan Mansfield's illustration on this cover. And then here you can see the masthead moves away and simplifies a little bit, which allows us to have more space for the image on the cover. And the NCLR 2015, the latest version, this beautiful, beautiful color. They're outside, beautiful images. Go take a look. So the future, what do I see as the future? I see that the NCLR continuing to thrive and just grow and become better, bigger and better. We've moved, we now have an online version that started in 2012, and so a lot of our information you can find online as well. I believe the reviews, some interviews.
Some of the content.
Yeah, some content's online, but the books have all the wonderful poetry, printed pieces that you can keep coming back to and reading over and over again. I just wanted to show you, this was a piece that I did in '97, so my second year working on the journal. Again, kind of playing with that idea of how you can push the type and what can happen with it. A lot of fun for me. So NCLR Design, the future is the vibrant landscape of this journal, and we need and want your support for the journal to help keep us thriving and help keep getting out there the wonderful writing of the writers of North Carolina and give something wonderful to the readers. So if you have any questions about anything, I'd be glad to take any questions. Otherwise, I thank you so much for your time. And I did want to also give thanks to those who gave me my beginning here at ECU. Eva Roberts, Craig Melrose, Joan Mansfield, Bob Rash, Dot Satterfield, John Satterfield. Some of them are not here any longer or have retired. But I appreciate my beginnings here at ECU that meant a lot for me and really gave me the drive to be who I am today. And I'm glad my father and my stepmother are here. And I'm very thankful that my full-time designer now, not student anymore, but past student, here in Baltimore is here as well, and my daughter. Thank you so much for your time.
She said she'd take questions.
Yeah, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Although I know I talk a lot, I'm pretty thorough.
We also have a reception outside. So, yeah.
Oh, this is my dad.
I remember when I went to school in East Carolina in 1960 to 64. I was a math major. And I really wanted my daughter to major in math or English. And she told me she was going to be an art major. I didn't know what to think. Art major? Because all the art people I knew, I'm telling you, were a little bit funny in some way. In those days, when I was in school, I remember when she got her first job, and I was so glad, because that meant I didn't have to spend any more money. Came over here one day at East Carolina, and they had her working in the publication department. That was her first job. I come over here one day, and the hundreds are all over this place. They sent me to where my daughter was. I finally found her after about an hour or two. She's in a basement. And I remember walking in that basement one day later, and my daughter says, "Daddy, I've got to go back to school because nobody knows who I am. I've already learned all I can about this job. They're already paying me the most they will ever pay me, is what she said to me. She may not recall all of it. So she decided she would go back to school. So she applied at NC State. She applied at this other school, Rhode Island School of Design. And she got accepted at State first. And that's where she was going to go, I thought. Then later on a Monday, after she got accepted at State on Friday, on Monday, she gets a call from Rhode Island School of Design. So she did, Daddy, I'm going to go to Providence, Rhode Island. For a long trip. But I'm really proud of her. If she's been an exceptional dog my whole life and her whole life. Extremely intelligent. I remember one time her mother wrote me a speech. And it was a novice. I was entering the contest of the novice. Couldn't speak to anybody. I was a math major. For some reason I could teach math. But I wasn't a writer. Could do English. I could diagram sentences. I could do all that kind of stuff. She wrote me a speech. Her mother did. That knocked them all dead. You would not believe you could have heard a pin dropping that way. That was a speech her mother wrote for me. And I won the contest. And it wasn't me as a speaker. It was the speech itself that won. And it was a JC. And we had to write a speech on one of the statements in the JC Creed. And she wrote me that speech. And I'll never forget it to this day. That I won the contest, could not speak at all, over what her mother had written for me. I'm really proud of you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. That was really fascinating and just inspiring. I was wondering, you said that one of the kind of push and pulls you sometimes have with Margaret and with Diane is about readability and making sure that you want your inclinations to be more experimental. They, of course, have readers who want to be able to see what they're doing. I was wanted to ask you about your other design work. I'm assuming you probably aren't the art director for another magazine too. That would take a lot of time. But what kinds of other work do you do in some of those venues? Are you able to push the envelope even further?
Yes. Oh, yes. So aside from teaching full-time and working as art director full-time, every time we rotate it's full-time, I also do book design, which is pretty straightforward design, not experimental, but all of my creative work that I do is very, very experimental. And 3 of the pieces in the gallery were studies that I started as book cover designs for my hopefully published book one day. It's called Obsession Graphic Design. And so the series in there were smaller, came from smaller studies that I did, and I create a lot of what I call typographic landscapes. So that really gives me the outlet, because I'm an artist at heart. I'm a designer, but I'm an artist as well, and I work with altered books. I'm sorry, readers, I cut old books apart and I create art. And create textural things with them, and then taking kind of what I've shown here in some areas where I know that my audience has to be able to read this, but I want to push boundaries, but I know there are limitations in what I can do. So I actually have quite a bit of work that I do that is all experimental, and it's all, I don't want to say unreadable, but it's, are you familiar with visual poetry? Back from the time of the Futurism, back in the 1919. Back in the day, began with like Marinetti and Apollinaire created visual poetry, and Apollinaire created calligrams, and it was creating visual poetry out of letters and how they fell and moved on the page. And I do a lot of that, the idea of visual and what's called concrete poetry, the idea of how you can build and create meaning out of words and the way that you build them and juxtapose them in space. And so I do a whole lot of that. And that's like, this is my love, but that's my love. Like I love to, I tell my students all the time, we as designers, you face this you're on this kind of hinge of I want to be creative and I want to be experimental, but I'm communicating for an audience. It's different than a painter who's very expressive, and they might be, either showing self-expression or expressing something for a client. But for a designer, most of what we do has to be readable, and it has a function and has a client and an audience and all of that. So it allows me to really play, which is what I like to do. So thank you for asking. I mean, I could do a whole talk about that too. So thank you. Any other questions? Well, thank you all for coming. We have a reception outside, and take a look at the gallery.
You can talk to Dana outside and enjoy the refreshments from Harriot College.